Over Jen. Good afternoon. The rest is in English. First of all, a question for you. You've seen the title of my presentation. It has the word lean in it. Most of you, I assume, know what lean is. Yes? It's about flow, scheduling, control, respect for people. Yes? So why are you all late? Why were you all late back from lunch? Not very lean, is it? We've wasted 20 minutes or so. Okay, not very lean. Okay, from now on, I'm going to ask you some questions throughout the course of my presentation. There is only one answer. The answer is always, yes, John. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yes. Thank you. Okay. Let's move. Try to get this to work. I'm doing two presentations today. This is the short and simple one because they told me that you are simple people. Is that right? Is that right? Yes, John. Okay. The one I do later is a bit more complicated for grown-up people. Okay. So you may come back for the second one as well. It's a project which is implemented by UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and they have a project called Trade-Related Technical Assistance, and it's based in Pakistan. Interestingly, it's funded by the EU, but implemented by UNIDO. And by and large, it's based on the principle that economics says that if you can produce goods that are compliant with international standards of quality and are competitively priced, economic theory says buyers will buy. Okay? You produce goods which have international quality standards and are competitively priced. The theory is that buyers will buy. The theory is wrong. Because buyers, like everybody else, are risk averse. So if they've been buying their, whatever it is, components from a supplier for the last 3 years, why should they change just because you say, mine are good, mine are as cheap? They are risk averse. So one thing this tries to do, this project, is to build what's called a trade corridor, which actually introduces potential exporters in Pakistan to potential importers elsewhere in the world, and over a period of 9 to 18 months to build trust by allowing them to meet, to discuss. We take the importers to Pakistan, we take Pakistan exporters to the importing countries, and we build trust and respect. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. Right? That's the background of what we're trying to do in Pakistan. But what we're trying to do first is to get those goods compliant and competitive. We're trying to build the capacity of Pakistan industry. Bit by bit, it's slow, right? And we're working within particular sectors, and we're trying to make them competitive. First of all, we need to understand their current performance. What is Pakistan industry like? And on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about 0.5. It's very, very poor performance. Their manufacturing practices in the best companies are excellent. So there are really, really good companies in Pakistan practicing excellent examples of lean and the quality control and of everything else. But the vast majority are a long way behind. It's a very, very long tail. And some of their working practices are, shall we say, 300 or 400 years old. They look and are very unsafe, dangerous, inefficient, wasteful. So there is an easy job to be done to bring them up to reasonable levels of performance. There is an impossible job to be done to bring them up quickly to world-class levels of performance. And I have learned over the course of my long life never to attempt the impossible. Okay, so we know what we're doing, we're bringing them forward more slowly than ideally we would like. Because all those things are in very short supply. They don't use technology very much at all, their manufacturing systems and practices are almost non-existent, and their employment practices are very poor. Now, I subscribe to a view of productivity which is referred to in my famous book, right? But I talk about social, environmental, and economic productivity. And I'm trying, over the next kind of phase of my life, to really talk about social productivity. Productivity for social good, social gain. And that's why Colin and I produced this book. And if you're in the next session, I'll give you a discount code to get a discount on that book. But it is, social productivity is important. It's about taking those building of capacity and competitiveness, but then applying it to social good and measuring the social impact. Which is what we're trying to do in Pakistan. We're trying to say, how do we get more people into employment? How do we get what bit of wealth there is in Pakistan shared more equitably, more widely amongst the general population? Because there's a great tendency when you build wealth for that wealth to remain in the hands of a very small number of people. And that's a recipe for a number of disasters, but particularly things like civil unrest, and particularly in countries like Pakistan, for religious intolerance. If you are very, very poor in Pakistan, you might as well think about the next life rather than this life. This life is so unpleasant that what the Imam tells you is the next life will be really good, so let's get there as quickly as possible. And the way in which you stop terrorism and war, things like that, is to spread wealth more equitably. I really do believe that, and that's why one of the reasons I'm involved in looking at social productivity. Right, somebody said in Pakistan, well, why don't we then apply lean manufacturing? It's a well-established approach, methodology, set of techniques. And what we said was, hang on a moment, it can be quite expensive. And we're not sure that companies in Pakistan are ready for that level of sophistication. Right, so we weren't sure that applying lean was the right thing to do, even though I'm a great supporter of lean, and we saw before lunch how effective it can be. But the kind of firms we're looking at were not ready for lean. So what we needed was a series of first steps, as it were, towards lean that could work in the context of the Pakistani both economy and culture. So what we did, being kind of lean thinkers, was to apply lean to lean itself. And we came up with something which we call lean Lite. Most of you will know the Pareto principle that says that very often 80% of the gains can be achieved through 20% of the effort, or 8% of something is good by 20% of something else. So 8% of your stock is often tied up in 20% of your materials and so forth. So we applied lean to lean and came up with lean Lite and said, what are the real principles of lean? And they are, as you know, flow, waste, and respect for people. If you can get materials to flow, if you can reduce waste, and if you can get people to think about each other and to recognise the skills and talents of people, then you start to make progress. Now, there is a national productivity organisation in Pakistan. It's been in existence for about 4 or 5 years, and I have done a little bit of work with them before, so I knew they existed, and I knew that they were the most obvious partner for us to work with. So, what we did first of all was to choose a sector to work in, and the sector we chose was fan manufacturing. It's centred around, centred around where A is Gujarat. And that made it really easy because there are something like 145 fan manufacturing companies in and around Gujarat. So it's very easy to work with the sector completely. So it was a good sector to work with. It's a sector that is incredibly small by international standards, but quite big by Pakistan standards. So it employs a fair number of people. Like all industries, it has a supplier base that extends its influence into lots of other areas, but it can't compete with the big guys, and the big guys are, as you might expect, China. So China has factories which are many, many times bigger than a typical Pakistan factory, and so Pakistan can compete, though, on flexibility. Its factories are actually so small that it becomes a virtue that they can change a production line is a bit of a joke actually, but they can change their models much faster than the big production lines in Japan. So they have to use that as a virtue. So that's who we worked with. Phase one of the project was to measure their current performance. And we did a benchmarking study of the whole sector, and we measured their OEE. Because that's an international measure which you can compare. And those of you who know anything about OEE will know that typically world-class OEE is reckoned to be about 85%. Okay, if you're doing well, you have an OEE of about 85%. Pakistan is somewhere in the 10 to 20%. Right? Incredibly low. So big, easy gains to be made. But it means that when you talk to Pakistan companies, when they look at their own performance, they have compared themselves with their neighbour in Gujarat, and they say, we're as good as they are. Right, now what we're saying is, well yes, we can compare you with firms in China and Germany and Finland and so on, and your performance is so bad that you're almost off the scale. And then they start to worry, and then they start to get motivated. I'm a great believer in measurement. We did a stakeholder analysis of the sector to say, who is it that could influence what we're doing, and who can stop what we're doing being effective? And whenever you do a project, always carry out that kind of analysis. Who can stop what we're doing from being effective? And we came up with a whole range of people. The national public organisation I said we were working with, but there are other government agencies. SMEDA is the Small Medium Enterprise Development Association. TEFTA is the Educational Training Organisation. And if you don't include them in your project, they will stop you being effective. They will find a way to undermine what you're doing because, and this is not Pakistan, all government agencies hate the success of other government agencies. All government departments hate success of other government departments. You have to get across those government silos, which are just like industrial silos. Departments compete with each other in industry, and they do in government. So we had to bring them on board, as well as the universities. Universities often think that they're responsible for training. They rarely are. They are responsible for education, but most universities do not have a clue about training for industry. And this was certainly true in Pakistan. But we have to get them involved, because they have money from the government and from other agencies, and they can influence policy. Now, the people from those organisations, what became, therefore, our delegates for a Lean Lite training course. So we took people from all of those agencies and said, we're going to turn you into master trainers. Right? So what we had to do first, of course, was to build a curriculum and some training materials for Lean Lite. Now, you might be surprised, those of you know about Lean, is we built only a 3-day course. We worked out that taking the basic principles of Lean, we could train somebody in 3 days to practice Lean to sufficient detail to work in the kind of context in which we were operating. And what we did was to have presentations and, much more importantly, a series of workshops and exercises so that they got practice at doing rather than thinking. So we wanted people who knew stuff but could also do stuff. And that's really important. we then did, after those 3 days, we took them straight to a fan manufacturing factory. Right? A factory called Kershik Fans. We'd already discussed with the owner that he was willing to let these people loose on his employees practicing their lean, light skills. Remember, this is the 4th day of training. They've had 3 days in a hotel doing theory, doing exercises and workshops. And straight away, this is really important, you get them on a factory floor looking at real examples. So the owner was already briefed. What we had to do now is to bring our delegates, these new, quote, experts, pointing out that what we want them to act as is not experts, but facilitators. Because as you know, lean is all about teamwork. We then briefed the employees, and the reason there are 2 of us stood up there is that I speak English, he's speaking Urdu. But none of the employees at the manufacturing level speak English at all, even though it is the official language of Pakistan. Right? So we briefed the employees that what we were going to do was to put a facilitator with them in a team to discuss how they could improve what they did in their production jobs. They were astonished. Nobody had ever talked to them before. Nobody had ever asked them for an opinion. Nobody had ever suggested they might know something, understand something, be able to do something. So they were incredibly motivated just to prove that they could actually tell you something about their own jobs, that they understood what was important, that they could actually tell you things that could be improved. All they needed to do was be asked. So we established some teams and set them, first of all, looking at the overall process. So looking at the flow. So follow the manufacture of a fan through the whole process and tell us where the flow fails. The first example, you know, if you go to any fan factory in Pakistan, there will be literally, I suppose, millions of rupees worth of work in progress. Because nothing flows. Right? So there are parts all over the place stacked. Now, some of that is necessary because the power supply in Pakistan is very unreliable. A typical factory will get perhaps 6 power cuts a day. Right? When they switch to generators, if they can afford to run the diesel to power the generators. Otherwise, they have to have buffer stock so that they can carry out manual processes during the power cuts. And this is the whole point, isn't it, Rob? When you take what you think you know to a different country, even to a different sector, a different factory, you have to understand the context of that sector. Pakistan is not Slovakia or the UK or Germany. You have to understand the context. Power supplies are an unfortunate fact of life. And obviously, having looked at the overall process, we then looked at the activities. Right? And we took the activities that individuals worked on and said, you tell us how to improve this. You tell us how to change this for the better. And of course they had the usual fears about, well, why should I tell you how to make my job more efficient so that you can then sack me? Right? It's a fear of all employees when you look at productivity. Well, what we had done, we'd got a guarantee from the owner that nobody would be sacked, that if we made, as we knew we would, significant productivity improvements, we talked to him about he could benefit from those improvements without costing his employees their jobs or any part of their pay. So, for example, one of the things we talked about, we said, let's assume we could double your production. Can you sell it? And he said, probably not. Not in the short term, at least. The market isn't there. So, what do you do if you double production and you can't sell it? Interesting question. We gave some ideas. And what we did, for example, we said, well, in that short term, while the market settles, shut your factory for 2 days. You save a lot of cost, right? And what we did then was say, hang on a moment, what about if we open that factory for those 2 days as an education stroke training institute for your staff? Because the staff don't want to stay at home they have no power, They've no fans themselves at home. They don't want to be at home because it's bad in terms of the respect they get from the community. So they were willing to come to work for 2 days, right, and study. And we said to the owner, we will help you provide teachers to give them literacy, to give them job-related skills, to give them lean-related skills to improve you even better. This is what I mean about social productivity, to take the productive gains and to turn it for the benefit of the community and the owner of the factory, not just the owner of the factory. We then asked each team to prepare a report. So they looked at the overall process, they looked at some specific activities, they now prepare a report, and the report to the owner, this is the owner on the left and his brother next to him, and what we've got then are other people from the factory, so that when our expert, our trained kind of moderator, facilitator, gave the report, the team of employees off the factory floor knew it was their views being put forward. And they could bask in that pride and say, that was my idea. I talked about it, that was my idea. So they gave the reports to the owner. And what we did then was to say, what's the results? And we got 27 after only 2 days. So we had a 3-day training course and a 2 days in the factory. We had 27 improved suggestions, resulting in a 100% increase in productivity. Right? 100% increase. Now you can do that in the kind of situation we're in. You can't do it in many other situations. Right? Well, what that means is we're saying we can double production, or half the time it takes to produce the same production. With guarantees, remember, that nobody will lose their jobs, that everybody is now working safer, more productively, and within a proper system. Every member of the workforce got a certificate to thank them for their participation, and again, nobody had ever bothered to recognise them before, to reward them, not financially, but to reward them just by saying thank you for your contribution. Nobody asked them before, nobody rewarded them before. And you could see the pride they took in acting. None of these people would have ever had certificate before, right? And they took real pride, and this is the thing about lean and its respect for people. Recognising the talents of all your workforce. So our next steps are to talk about the implementation issues, because we need to learn lessons. So as he implemented these 27 suggestions, and he'd implemented the first 3 before we left, right, the big ones. What we have to do now is to spread these lessons throughout the rest of the fan industry in Pakistan. He knows that. He's happy with that. He's happy that the sector gains as much as he gains. We need to check that he is sharing these gains, right? And to make sure that the health and safety practices that we insisted upon actually are maintained. So we do 3 monthly checks for the first year to check what's happening and that it fits in with the overall framework that we established. And then we say, all right, we've made changes to this factory. Which of those changes would apply elsewhere throughout the sector? And we're currently rolling out those changes across the sector. And then we say, hang on, we've actually got 15 people trained here in this lean Lite. Can we use them in other sectors? And we're actually moving into the sports goods sector, which is quite big, the surgical goods sector, and the cutlery sector, using the same set of people to do the same kind of exercise. It's all very basic stuff. And then we will remeasure. So we're going to give this 1 year to bed down, and then we'll measure the OEE gain and see where we've got to from our original kind of average of about 18%. So what I'm saying is, what we've got here is a light process that has high impact. And the lesson for you, I'm hoping that you're going to take away, is that there are no rules about these things. When you take something like lean, you can do a 3-month, a 6-month, a 1-year course on lean, What matters is that you practice the questioning approach that all productivity improvement methodologies imply, that you practice it to get impact. I don't care whether you do lean right, I do care that you make an impact on the work that you're trying to study, on the workforce you're trying to study, on the business you're trying to study. Right? I always say that I built my whole career on asking stupid questions. And all lean is a framework that allows you to ask stupid questions. Why do you do it like that? Who does that? Where's that done? Why is that done like that? When do you do that? You just keep asking questions until people get fed up with the questions and start giving you answers. And the more questions you ask, the more they tell you the truth. So Lean Lite is a subset of Lean that helps you ask the right kinds of questions. And that very, very simple process, in this context, can have high impact. Thank you.